Input meeting about water fluoridation in this community. That subject has been debated by council before many times. Today we're very fortunate to have speakers, credible speakers, represent both sides of the issue, and I hope this meeting will help to close the understanding gap. This is the first time we actually have that. Normally we would just have one side, and this time we're looking all towards the dynamic information session. We do have two main speakers, which are Dr. Sudhitra Nadi, who is Medical Officer of Health, County of Lambton, and Dr. Hardy Lineback, who is well known internationally for his research on fluoride and dentistry and toxicity of fluoride as well. So would you come here, Dr. Nadi? I don't know whether that was agreed to, the order of speakers. Okay, could I have you, Doctor?
This way. There you go. Yeah.
And since I do not have in this package the general outline of your credential, could you give us an idea, and I won't count that into your presentation time, about your professional qualifications?
Sure, yeah. I'm a medical doctor. I have that degree, as well as a Master of Public Health, Master of Business Administration. I'm a fellow of the college, a certificate of the College of Family Physicians of Canada, as well as a fellow of the Royal College of Physicians of Canada.
Oh, thank you. You can follow up with your prepared presentation.
Sure, okay. Well, thank you for having me today. I appreciate the opportunity to contribute to this discussion on fluoride, which I know that you've had multiple times over the course of the last few years, and I'm happy to be here to address any questions that I can. I guess really before I start, I just want to express Lambton Public Health's condolences on the passing of Monsieur André Morin. He was a really valued colleague to all of us and a strong partner for public health. So we will miss him, and I just wanted to convey that to you. My role here really is to represent the 65% of Sarnia residents who we know support fluoride based on our 2013 surveillance of Sarnia and Lambton County residents. And to have you remember that, the public health position on this issue is really that fluoride is a recognized effective public health intervention, which is supported by the World Health Organization, the CDC, the Canadian Dental Association, and so on. Multiple other organizations of professionals have all continued to agree that this is an intervention worth continuing. And remember that when we're talking about fluoride, really what we're talking about is benefits versus harms, and the primary benefit is the reduction in decayed, missing, and filled teeth, both baby teeth and permanent teeth. And also that the real harm that we're talking about is fluorosis. So I'm going to suggest to you that all of the other harms that have been associated with fluoride have not been borne out by systematic reviews. And so when you're talking about concerns about fluoride and cancer, fluoride and thyroid disease, fluoride and bone disease, that these things have not really been demonstrated as significant associations. And when I talk about evidence, the two pieces I'm really going to rely on are systematic reviews of multiple studies. So really that's how we try to look at this issue, to take reviews that have been done of multiple studies that meet inclusion criteria. And if multiple studies are pointing towards the same thing, then we start to say there might be something here. There might be something that the association is strengthened with more and more studies that say the same thing. So on balance of the evidence, there are two major systematic reviews that I'll talk about, and I believe that Dr. Lineback will talk about them as well. One is a systematic review that was done in 2000 at the University of York, and they asked 5 key questions, and I'm going to tell you what they are, and I'll tell you what the answers were that they uncovered. The first question that they asked was, what are the effects of fluoridation of drinking water supplies on the incidence of cavities? And what they said was that the best available evidence, suggests that fluoridation does reduce the prevalence of cavities. And a median of 6 people need to receive fluoridated water in order for 1 extra person to be cavity-free. And just by way of comparison, that's a really, really good number, because if you would have to give over 1,500 people at risk a daily aspirin in order to prevent 1 heart attack or stroke. So by comparison, you're talking about treating 6 people to ensure that 1 person is cavity-free. That's a really reasonable public health number to look at, to say, we don't have to treat that many people to ensure that, that kids remain cavity-free. What's the effect over and above that offered by the use of alternative interventions? So by alternative interventions, we mean fluoridated toothpaste. You've heard all of that, that there's other ways that people can get fluoride, fluoridated toothpaste, fluoride varnish, and so on. And what they found was that there's an effect of water fluoridation that's still evident in studies after 1974, in spite of the assumed exposure to fluoride from other sources in the population. Remember that this is, they highlight that there's only a few studies like this, and they're of moderate quality. So recognize that a lot of the research was done a while back. The third question they asked was, does fluoridation result in a reduction of caries, which are cavities, across social groups and between geographic locations? The answer to that question was that the evidence appears to suggest a benefit in reducing the severity of tooth decay between social classes for 5-year-old kids and 12-year-old kids, and that association needs further clarification, which is something that you'll find in almost every review, that the scientists or the authors will call for more studies or more clarification of certain details. And does fluoridation have negative effects? So this is from 2000, and the response was that there's a dose-response relationship between fluoride and fluorosis, which you've all heard about. And a dose-response relationship means the more of one you get, the more of the other that you can expect. Remember that fluorosis is largely a cosmetic rather than a functional issue, as compared to decayed and missing or cavitatious teeth. And if you think about if you want to know sort of what's the global prevalence of fluorosis, the latest or the most recent data that we have is from 2009. So it's not super recent, but it's recent enough. That was from the Canadian Health Measures Survey, which did oral exams of children between ages 6 and 12 across Canada. And they found that 12% had very mild fluorosis, 4.4% had mild fluorosis. And actually, when they're looking at the real outcome of interest, which was moderate or severe fluorosis, that so few Canadian children had that the prevalence was actually too low to allow reporting it. But they did mention that number was less than 0.3%. And if any of you are interested in more recent data, or when will we be doing a survey like that again, that's going to happen in 2020 or 2021. So that's when, after that, you could expect to get more recent surveillance on sort of exam-based data. And so what they said was that the best available evidence on the association between fluoride and bone fractures also showed no association. The other adverse effects studied, including cancer, did not provide enough good quality evidence on any outcome to reach conclusions, and that the outcomes related to infant mortality, congenital defects, and IQ indicate a need for high quality research using appropriate analytical methods to control for confounding, which means that they didn't find an association, but they would recommend that further research be done. All very reasonable. When you look at a more recent review, which was 2015, a Cochrane review that Dr. Lineback may also discuss, their conclusion was that water fluoridation is effective at reducing the levels of tooth decay among children. And that resulted in 35% fewer decayed, missing, and filled baby teeth, and 26% fewer decayed, missing, and filled permanent teeth. It also led to an increase of 15% in children who have no decay in their baby teeth at all, and 14% increase in children who have no decay in their permanent teeth. And again, so these results, they say, are predominantly based on old studies and may not be applicable today. They also had insufficient information on what happens when you stop fluoride. That's something that's become a more recent issue, and so it's important that we do good quality research to say what happens when you stop fluoride in a community. They had insufficient information on the effects on adults and varying effects by social class. So again, there are some unanswered questions, but at a baseline, the overwhelming majority of evidence is in favor of continuing water fluoridation in the community. I want to share with you a little bit about some information, which you've probably already heard from some people about why folks don't want fluoride in the water. You should know about that, and you should know what my response would be. Generally, people are concerned in general about chemicals, adding chemicals to the water supply. And it's important to remember that we do that in regulated ways to ensure specific benefits. So that's true of fluoride, and that's also true of chlorine. We know that we also add chlorine to water, and that chlorine is a chemical that has very similar properties to fluoride. It has similar concerns about the way that it's handled and used in a concentrated form, but that when you apply it in a rigorous procedural way to water, that we know the benefits of chlorine are reduced disease pathogens in the water, so reduced bacteria in the water, and that translates into better water for us to drink. Similarly, with fluoride, we know that the effects are better oral health, especially for children, and so we know that the effects, the benefits are there as long as you add it in a regulated way. You should also know that there are concerns about choice. People will say to you, well, I don't want fluoride in the water and I'm a taxpayer, so I shouldn't have to consume water that has fluoride. And to that I say that it's, the analogy is that I can't come to you and say, please reduce my taxes by 75% because I only use 25% of the roads in Sarnia. Similarly, for these public goods, you have to make decisions that impact everybody on the basis of the best available evidence. And currently the best available evidence suggests maintaining water fluoridation here because there's no naturally occurring supply. The last part, and the other part of that about choice is that people say, well, if people want fluoride, they should be able to just add fluoride to their water. And, if people want to disinfect with chlorine, they should just be able to do that. It's actually very inefficient and potentially unsafe for people to do that in their own home. And so when you do that centrally and are monitoring the parameters of the water before it goes out of the facility, then that's a better day for everybody. It ends up with, you end up with safer, better regulated water. And the last thing is, I think you should know that there are probably also several concerns about some kind of conspiracy, trying to brainwash people and that sort of thing, which I've also heard from folks. And the only thing I can say to that is that that's not my specific area of expertise, but that I also don't have any particular evidence that that's happening, and so I can't really agree with that notion either. The question I think for you really is when you take the evidence for and against, is a threshold for action met? So is there enough evidence to suggest that you should stop doing a practice that you've been doing for many, many years? And I would say that threshold has not been met. I think Dr. Lineback will probably tell you that the evidence for fluoride is of moderate quality and is older in nature. As my parents like to remind me very frequently, just because something's old doesn't mean it's wrong. But more importantly, I think that, there's also only low or moderate quality evidence on the other side. So we're dealing with a playing field of low and moderate quality evidence, and you should not be guided by just one study that says this or one study that says that. You should be guided by larger evidence reviews that look at multiple studies in multiple jurisdictions across multiple time points. And currently, all of those studies say that there is benefit to continued water fluoridation. So, my recommendations to you in this instance, even though I'm aware that the council has taken a position of not supporting fluoride for the moment, I would maintain that you should continue fluoridation of water in this region. I would maintain that 65% of your residents in Sarnia continue to support it at the last count. And, there is an opportunity for Sarnia to support and participate in research that generates updated evidence in this area. So as a community where water fluoridation has been in play for several years, there's no reason why we can't participate in research that would be up to date and of better methodology if that's happening to update the evidence reviews, so that later when somebody does an evidence review, maybe, we'll be counted in those communities where a really high quality study did come from our participation. The last thing I just want to say before I leave is that, you know, I have a professional obligation to protect the health of everybody here, including the folks who are here, including the folks who are here, and including the folks who didn't come today. And I take that very, very seriously, and I look at the evidence very seriously. And I think the balance of evidence in this case strongly supports continued water fluoridation. To the regulated levels, it's very highly regulated. We've worked with laws, we've talked to them, and we know what their procedures are, and they do a great job at regulating the water system in terms of the parameters to make sure that the water is safe. And I also have a personal commitment to this community, which is that I'm here and I live here, and that if there were anything that I genuinely thought were harming me or everybody whose job it is for me to protect their health, then I would be coming here and saying, you should take fluoride out of the water, and I'm not. So I thank you for the chance to discuss what the evidence is. I'm happy to answer your questions. I'm sorry I don't have a PowerPoint, but perhaps what I said was reasonable and sufficient.
Thank you. Would you accept if we get both speakers to complete their presentation, and after that they would come back, and then if there's a question of council, both of them could reply if they so wish. So it would be balanced.
Can I just ask, well, could I have the privilege, Mr. Chair, of asking a question about...
You can always ask anything you want.
Okay, thank you. Just to one of the last points that Dr. Ronaday made, could Lambton College and all of its water focus work pair with Lambton Public Health to use some of our local expertise to study this in a deeper way? And is there, in your knowledge, any monies, grant availability that could bring some profile and opportunity for the expansion of Lambton College and our local focus on water to undertake these studies of which you speak?
Yeah. I think that's a great idea. I think certainly with Lambton College's increasing focus on healthcare and applied healthcare research, this would certainly fit under applied health research. And there's no reason why Lambton Public Health couldn't continue our partnership with Lambton College to work on specific studies. As to whether or not there's money, that's always a tricky question to answer. I think, in our experience with Lambton Community Health Study, right, finding money for things where even if you know that there's a really important need can be very difficult. And so I wouldn't say that there's lots of money out there. I think what academics currently do is sort of go and find pockets of money to do pieces of work. And we would have to be sort of aware of when that's happening so that we could get involved. I don't have a better answer than that because there's no specific pocket of money for fluoride in research grants, right? So you have to make a case that there's a health-related issue that needs to be studied, and then fluoride is now competing with all of the other public health issues for funding.
Okay, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Renati, and I hope you come back and participate, answer more questions. I'm sure there's quite a few of them. And again, I want to have it evenly balanced between the two of you, so nobody can accuse us of any biases here. So thank you. We'll see you shortly. And can't we go after both speakers? Or go ahead.
No, actually, and thank you very much, Dr. Renade, for your presentation. I just wanted to draw your attention, Mr. Chair, to the fact that this is a public presentation, not a public debate. So in the interest of getting everyone through that's come here that wishes to speak and have their voices heard, I would caution you about engaging in a public debate. We could be here for days.
It is not public debate, but the council members should have every opportunity to take advantage of two very credible speakers to connect with the knowledge they have. And it's not a debate. This is basically public input meeting, and we have two very qualified speakers that can assist us in the future debates.
I'm just suggesting, Mr. Chair, that perhaps if Council has questions for Dr. Ranaday or for Dr. Lineback after we hear his presentation, that we put them into writing so that the other people that are here that wish to speak can also speak. That's just a suggestion. But
you put it in writing. People are watching it now. They should have a benefit of the expertise of those two individuals. That's my anyway. Professor Lineback. And could you start with introduction of your professional qualifications as well, so we know it? And I won't count that as part of your presentation.
That's great. No problem. I really appreciate being invited here. It's not that far away, 5 hours. Anyway, I'm going to try and answer the question of whether or not Sarnia water fluoridation is safe or unsafe, effective or not. Here are my qualifications. I have a BSc and PhD in biochemistry, and I studied dental tissues for my PhD. I have a dental degree, been practicing since '83. I was head of preventive dentistry at University of Toronto and full professor. I retired in 2012. I've done decades of funded research on teeth, bones, and the effects of fluoride. And I was the only Canadian member on the 2006 U.S. National Academies of Science Subcommittee on Fluoride in Drinking Water. So Dr. Runaday did talk about systematic reviews and the meta-analyses of randomized controlled trials. Now, the randomized controlled trials are the trials that you use for drug approval in Health Canada. Way down at the bottom is expert opinion in terms of evidence to support effectiveness. Now, what happens with dental decay worldwide, it has declined. And not just fluoridation, but a whole bunch of other factors have been involved in lowering dental decay worldwide, including fluoridated toothpaste. It turns out you have to fluoridate for about 40 years to save one tooth from decay. So the 25% decline represents basically one filling per person over 40 years. Now, Dr. Runaday did talk about the Cochrane Review, and the most recent one reiterated that there were no RCTs, no randomized controlled trials. Only 3 studies were done after 1975, which is when toothpaste was in wide use. So that means the toothpaste basically competed with water fluoridation. None of the studies took into consideration all of the factors that lowered dental decay. Now, the dental hygienists have been quoted as saying that Calgary is an example of what happens when you stop water fluoridation, that you see an increase in dental decay. But in Calgary, they actually did not do that. In Calgary, there was an increase in dental decay, and even though they stopped fluoridation in 2011, it made no difference in terms of the dental decay. A neighbor, Windsor, stopped fluoridation in 2013. You can even see that the dental decay dropped after they stopped water fluoridation. So here's the comparison of the reviews that Dr. Runaday talked about, and what he even used the word overwhelming evidence. This is what the profession says: overwhelming evidence of benefit. In fact, there is very limited quality research to support that. They say it benefits it's an equitable service. It benefits the poor. In fact, there's E level of evidence for that. There's really no evidence for it. They say it's safe. And the reviews, the York Review, the Cochrane Reviews, basically say the level is about a C level evidence. It's weak evidence for safety. They say it benefits adults. There are no studies to show that. What level should you be fluoridating at? Well, it turns out the most recent research shows the level should be maybe around 0.35 parts per million, mostly because of all the other sources of fluoride. You're at about 0.6, 0.7, which is not that much more beneficial than 0.35. In fact, there's an overlap with the toxic range, the toxic level where you start to get fluorosis, is 1.5. Therapeutic range overlaps that. Why does it overlap? It's because some people take in more fluoride than others. Athletes, outdoor laborers, people with kidney failure that are on hemodialysis, they're having major problems with clearing out the fluoride from their system, even when they drink normal levels of fluoridated water. And the worst case is babies on infant formula. They're getting adult doses. So if you take a baby on infant formula and you add tap water, or even the nursery water that you can get at Walmart, you're ending up giving this baby a dose that is 400% higher than what's recommended by the Canadian Dental Association to prevent dental fluorosis. This is a direct quote from the Cochrane Reviews. Where the fluoride level in water is 0.7 parts per million, there's a chance of around 12%, or 1 in every 8 kid, of people having dental fluorosis that may cause concern about how their teeth look. So they're worried about the way they look. This is what you see in Canada. 1 in every 10th kid has some form of fluorosis. Some of it is severe and needs to be treated. And it gets worse. So Dr. Runaday talked about one study that was done, never published, and said it was too low to report. In actual fact, there are lots of studies to report how serious it is in Canada, in the fluoridated cities. It gets worse with age. You can imagine a 16-year-old wanting to have the teeth finally treated because of the fluorosis. The largest study in the States has shown that it actually increases. It has been increasing over the years. It's getting worse and worse. And the most recent study, called the NHANES study, has shown that it's even worse than what is shown in this graph. So what do dentists do? I've treated numerous cases like this. The objectionable fluorosis that's mild can be microabraded, or just shave off the surface of the enamel. And then you have to bleach. It can cost up to $2,000. Sometimes you put composite veneers over top of the fluorosis. In some cases, dentists even put porcelain veneers. And each case can be up to $20,000 if you cover all the teeth with porcelain veneers. So I'm starting to look at the cost of what it might cost the families in Sarnia. Laws basically has about 20,000 kids serviced by their water supply. About 1 in 10, or 2,000 kids, will be seeking some treatment, or will want to have some treatment for their fluorosis. So maybe if 1,000 have microabrasion and bleaching, and 900 have cosmetic fillings, and only 100 have porcelain veneers. So only 10% or 100 out of the 2,000 end up with porcelain veneers. That's a huge amount of money that they have to spend to treat the fluorosis. I estimated about $4.3 million. How much is it costing you to fluoridate? This is a direct quote from the Lambton Health. It's $1.26 per resident per year. You have to fluoridate for 40 years. You also spent this money on a new fluoride system, which was financed, and that has to be replaced in about 20 years. So it's costing about $1 million for this new fluoride system. And you don't even consider all of these other factors in terms of the cost of fluoridation. There's a whole number of other indirect costs related to fluoridation. So the cost for fluoridation, according to that $1.26 per person per year, would be about $5 million after 40 years. New equipment, $1 million. Cost to repair the fluorosis, as I estimated, $4.3 million. A total of $10 million next 40 years. And you're saying you're going to save a filling per person over the next 40 years. 100,000 people in the Lambton area saving one filling per person, that's $10 million. There's no cost savings, none whatsoever. It's a wash. What happens when you swallow the fluoride? It goes in your stomach, immediately goes into the bloodstream. Most of it gets accumulated in the teeth and bones. You can't excrete it in the breast milk, sweat, or saliva. The rest gets excreted in the kidneys and peed out. Once it gets in your cells, it's like a bomb goes off. It's really quite harmful. We did a study showing that the people in Toronto who fluoridated had much higher levels of fluoride in their bone compared to Montreal, was never fluoridated. So if they started fluoridation in Sarnia in, 63? I couldn't find the number or the year that you started, but most of you in this room have had a lifetime of fluoride accumulation. You've got fluoride in your bone because of fluoridation. And we showed that the strength of the bone was lower in the more fluoridated group. You're making your bones more brittle. Not only that, but because the fluoride accumulates in the bone, you're now also exposing the immune system to possible harm, causing immune system changes. This is a Scientific American article, and here's a quote: may induce malignant tumors. Based on this particular study, that there was a 5-fold increased risk of bone cancer in boys because of water fluoridation. And then there's a fluoride effect on IQ, or brain chemistry. There are over 100 animal studies where fluoride alters the brain chemistry and physiology. 34 out of the 36 animal studies have shown a reduced ability to learn. In 51 out of 58 human studies, fluoride lowers IQ. So you get dental fluorosis in 1 in every 10 kids, and that dental fluorosis is associated with a change in IQ. Here's the fluorosis rates. As you get higher fluoride exposure, you have a lower IQ. This has been documented in systematic reviews by a Harvard professor and his graduate student, Anna Choi. Now, Dr. Ranade has said that it's perfectly safe if regulated properly, but you cannot regulate it in these people. They get too much of it. We don't have any studies at all to show that athletes are okay, that outdoor laborers are okay by drinking 6 liters a day, that people with kidney problems are okay, and especially infants whose minds are developing. We don't know if they're okay. So, my conclusion, it's my opinion based on the research that we did and all the research we did, the National Academy of Science, that it can cause bodily harm, that it does not provide the dental benefits as claimed, and is not cost effective at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Lineback. I would like to welcome back Dr. Renati to join in answering the questions from Council. And again, if you feel you don't, but I would like to have it balanced in a way that any question that comes from Council could be alternatively answered by both of you. Okay, the floor is open for questions from Council members. I have Councillor Burshi.
I have a question. About, I think, 4 years ago, the provincial government has decided to have a survey all over Ontario, and they brought in experts like yourself and to make a decision for them. And they were thinking of having bill, a law all over Ontario. But after a few months or whatever, they decided they won't go through it because there was no balance. And this is their finding. After they spent too much a lot of money, a lot of research, they decided they won't go through it. If they had a resolution one way or the other, they would have imposed a law and it would be all over overnight. And that's the problem the people of Ontario is facing. So are you aware of what the Ontario government did? And
Yes, I'm quite aware. And I'll answer that first if you'd like to answer next. But from my understanding is that the municipalities are responsible for fluoridation. Health Canada has no liability whatsoever for its recommendation for 0.7 parts per million. They did a review of it. It was kind of biased because they had only pro-fluoridation people on the review panel. And when they recommended 0.7 parts per million, it just went along with the rest of the world. The rest of the world is going 0.7 parts per million. U.S. dropped it. Okay, so now they're saying, well, this is a provincial matter. This should only be discussed at a provincial level because it's a health matter. So they pass it on to the province. Province has passed a resolution or a law saying that it should become mandatory, but that's not a law that has been that has any teeth in it. So now you're still responsible at the municipal level to decide whether or not to fluoridate. You actually, as councillors, are making the responsible decision to put the fluoride chemical, which is a drug, in the drinking water.
Councillor Mitchell?
Yes, we had a presentation.
Wait a second.
sorry.
Dr. Anedi.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, I think I would generally agree with what Dr. Lineback said. I think I believe that there was an effort at the province to examine the idea of mandating fluoridation across the province, and I do not believe that the decision not to do that was guided by evidence so much as it was guided by a desire to leave that decision making with municipalities. So.
Yeah, and that was a private bill as well, which very often do not pass. Councillor Mitchell.
Yes, we had a presentation some months back from a local resident, Mr. Rod Gowrie, about HFSA specifically. And that's rang with me ever since I sat there. I'm lucky my wife convinced us to get a water filtration thing, and so apparently I'm on the mend. But that all these other things come with HFSA, that it's the way it's an industrial effluent that then is shipped up. It's not regulated in any fashion as far as what each shipment of it has in it. It has all these other chemicals that, arsenic, lead, there's a whole bunch of stuff that just then get dumped in as well. It does have the fluoride component that washes out as it mixes with the water. I remain very concerned about what comes of the rest of it, and is that measured in the actual measurement down line. They're concentrating on 0.7. Let's say they do an excellent job in laws of hitting their number consistently. Does anyone measure that we ever get above, or to what level some of these other ancillary compounds that just happen to be in there as well, what level they accrue to?
Yeah, sure. It's a really good question. I mean, I think the answer to that question is that municipal drinking water is regulated for all kinds of compounds, including arsenic and lead. And so when, laws does testing on that water, but so do the water operators. And so we get reports from the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change about water quality in all of these different parts of Lambton County, and they include whether or not any of the thresholds for lead, arsenic, and other compounds have been exceeded. And so what you would see is if that were a real concern at the front end, then you would be seeing at the other end more exceedances of arsenic and lead and those things, and we don't have a common problem with that at all.
If you might speak to that, Dr. Lineback.
Well, you are actually adding some ancillary non-desirable elements some of them are actually quite toxic. Arsenic, for instance, is one of those elements that comes along with the hydrofluorosilicic acid. And if you start with a starting material that has enough of it in it, when you dilute the fluoride down, you still have some arsenic that you're pumping into the drinking water. Now, whether or not you're going to exceed that 10 parts per billion level depends on whether or not you're adding, let's say, more than 10%. I talked to some waterworks people in the States where they were concerned that the water level already had arsenic in it to 10 parts per billion. And as soon as they fluoridated the drinking water, it went to 12 parts per billion, and they had to do something about the arsenic. So you are getting some arsenic, and it's a carcinogen. It's supposed to be 0. You're not supposed to add it purposely.
Okay, I have Councillor Kurtz and Councillor Gillis in that order.
Thank you. Is it Mayor Brusewitz? I want to be sure I've got that
I'm
right.
just acting.
Okay. Just a philosophical question. If we had not ever put fluoride into the water, ever, and we just suddenly right about now thought that would be a pretty fine idea to introduce this medication to the drinking water, do you think it would ever pass? Would it pass the social license test, and would it pass the regulatory test?
I can tell you that in North America, there haven't been, well, let's say in Canada, there haven't been any communities that have actually started water fluoridation. They're that concerned about it. When you do start water fluoridation, you will increase the amount of dental fluorosis in the community, along with all the other health risks that you might have.
Okay.
Councillor Gillis.
Sorry.
Oh,
can
sorry,
I-
yes.
Yeah,
right,
thanks.
I'm sorry.
I think the framing of your question is not really appropriate. So you refer to it as a medication with the presumption that that's the issue, and that's not really the issue. It's similar to anything else that we would add to water, like chlorine. So let's take chlorine and say if there were communities that weren't adding chlorine to their water and they weren't doing any water treatment, would they look at chlorine as a potential, along the lines of treatment for water? They absolutely would. And similarly, I would say if there are communities that didn't have fluoride naturally occurring in their water and they were looking for a range of interventions to improve oral health, that certainly community water fluoridation would be among those interventions and probably the most upstream of them.
Can I just challenge you on the point that chlorine and fluoride are the same? Isn't chlorine put into the drinking water to make it safe to drink?
Yes, but I guess what I'm saying is I challenge your assumption that one of them is a medication and the other one isn't. They're both compounds that are added to water to provide benefit.
So one is necessary to make it safe, and the other one has been determined to have other benefits that, why don't we put aspirin in the water too, if there's a benefit to that?
I'm sure that they've been talking about it. So, hang on. So I think that really the issue is that, chlorine is among a list of treatment options for water to reduce pathogens, and similarly, fluoride is among a list of options that can improve oral health in a community.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Gillis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Lineback, I'll direct this question to you. You were originally a person who was pro-fluoride. I believe that was part of your CV. And now you are anti. What has changed your mind?
Want the short story?
Yes, please, the short story.
Well, basically, I was teaching preventive dentistry at the university and teaching the benefits of fluoride to all the dental students. That was my area of expertise. I didn't know any of the health effects of fluoridation back in those days. When I started learning about the health effects, I published a paper back in '93 that maybe we're putting too much fluoride in the drinking water, or kids are getting it from too many sources, and they're developing bone problems because of it. That was my first publication in 1993. I can tell you I got a lot of flack from that because fluoride was only supposed to be added to the drinking water to affect the teeth. But because it has to be swallowed, it doesn't have to be swallowed. You can rinse and spit out your drinking water, but you're not going to do that. It only works topically. It works by affecting the teeth by swishing it around. Once you swallow it, then it goes into your bone and causes a problem with your bone. Unfortunately, back in those days, The literature showed basically that because there was only one source of fluoride, and that was the drinking water, it was a benefit. Then along came all these other fluoride sources like toothpaste. And if you have toothpaste and all the other food sources and pollution, you add all that together, you've got so much fluoride in your bone now that you're actually getting brittle bones because of it.
So basically, initially, a little was good, but if a little is good, a lot is better. And that's basically what has happened?
What has happened is that we disregard the total dose of
That's
fluoride.
what I mean. Yes.
And now we keep saying the more the better. It's not. We should limit how much. Most of the fluoride that kids get is from the water. You just turn off the taps and it'll control it.
So if I may, Mr. Chair, I have a follow-up. Does fluoride dissipate in the water, or does it accumulate in the water?
That's one of the problems between chlorine and fluoride. Chloride will combine and produce chlorine, which will dissipate. You can leave a glass of water in the fridge and lose the chlorine. If you boil water, you'll concentrate the fluoride. And a lot of people will boil their drinking water to make up infant formula, which is the worst thing you can do. You'll increase the fluoride in their drinking water, in their infant formula.
So if all of LAW's participants got together and decided to take fluoride out of the water, would it disappear initially, or would it take many years for the water to lose the fluoride, or would it ever?
I'm sure that within a few months, turning off the tap will still result in some fluoride being consumed, but once the whole system flushes through, then the amount of fluoride that's left in the drinking water will be down to what you've got in Lake Huron and St. Clair. This is where you're getting your water from, right?
Yes.
Lake Huron and St. Clair River. It's very low in fluoride.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Skillis. Councillor McDougall.
Yes, I'd like each of you to question on or to comment on an understanding that I thought I gathered from some earlier presentations, that the primary benefit of fluoride was to the formation of permanent teeth, and that's why it was important for children to receive fluoride when their permanent teeth were growing. Yet we tend to, we all brush with fluoridated toothpaste, and we do that all our lives. And some adults are still getting fluoride treatment on teeth. Could each of you comment, please, on the theory and value of that practice?
I'll go first. The Center for Disease Control has finally admitted that fluoride only works topically, that there's no benefit to swallowing it in terms of making teeth stronger. It doesn't make them stronger. In fact, it makes them weaker. There's so much evidence now that fluoride only works topically, that the best way to use fluoridated water is to rinse and spit. It works topically. You don't need to swallow it. All the damage occurs when you swallow it, and it gets incorporated into teeth and bones.
Okay, thank you. And then Dr. Ronaday.
Yeah, I would make 2 points about that. I think we've seen over the last many years that there are an increase in available alternatives, right? And when those alternatives are applied by regulated professionals, there's a reasonable there's a reasonableness to it, that they're doing it for a particular indicated reason, right? That's different from community water fluoridation, which is intended to benefit everyone, regardless of their access to those dental treatments or not. And I think the other side of it is just remember that when you're talking about these things having a hypothetical health effect, when you look at the actual health effects, those aren't there. So we are not seeing evidence of that, such that we would be saying that there's a concern upstream about fluoridation.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from council? So I have quite a few, but I think I just ask one. The risk factor here, probability of overdosing of the population. And I'm pretty sure that Dr. Renati is familiar with the dark era of fluoridation, the history of of our area, 1993, fluoridation equipment fails. The concentration levels went from the guidance number of 0.7 to 13 to 17. And I would like both of you to comment, how often do those things happen? And specifically, Dr. Ranadi, did you do any follow-up study of health effects on the community? Because the community didn't even know for 3 days we're overdosed with this super high concentrations. And for example, a question I have for you, apparently the symptoms of skeletal fluorosis are similar to arthritis. So are the people actually misdiagnosed as having arthritis when they actually may have the skeletal fluorosis? So I would like to comment you on the risk, like how often it happens around the world, and the consequential effect on the community in terms of misdiagnosis and so on. Cool.
Go ahead.
Okay, sure. Okay, I guess, the event that you're talking about from 1993, we actually had to go back into some of our records and connect with City of Sarnia staff to find out what that was about, because it was so much time had passed. I was not here then, so it's very hard. If your question is what did I do about it, nothing. I was still learning to be a doctor.
So nothing.
But at the time, but in terms of what was done, I think certainly. The response was one where we learned more about what everybody's doing and what the protocols are for monitoring fluoride. And I think in the response to that, the protocols have been revamped, and so have our coordination between agencies, certainly. So for example, we know that there's routine testing of the fluoride levels in the water bylaws, and when they detect something that's out of the ordinary, they call us and we work with them in real time to figure out what to do about it, or if the system is down. Then, most often I would say too that the calls we get or the notifications we get are about the system being down and no fluoride being added to the water. And then that happens for a few hours and they tell us when the system will be back online, as opposed to the opposite where there's more fluoride than should be being added.
So are you telling me there's nothing in the files, there was no follow-up of the toxicity effect on the community after we had this major overdose? Is that correct? I know you were not here, but...
Yeah, it's looking through the documentation that we have and that the City of Sarnia has. I think the response was that this is an acute incident that was managed through sort of agency cooperation and collaboration, right? That you get better protocols in place, you're working together, you establish what the thresholds are. In terms of what was done to investigate any health outcomes related to that, I don't know. I don't have any information about what was done at that time on our side to look at sort of epidemiological data. I can't answer that question.
Dr. Lineback.
It occurs quite often in small towns where they have overfeeds, accidental overfeeds. A real good example that was documented in the literature was Hooper Bay, Alaska, where they had an accidental overfeed and it went to 100 parts per million, which is the lowest level of fluoride rinse for kids. But the entire town was drinking it. And the symptoms of too much fluoride, which would have happened in Sarnia at 13 parts per million, is gastric upset, nausea, and vomiting. So that happened in Hooper Bay, Alaska. Everybody was vomiting, had gastric upset, and the local doctor said, it must be a bug in the water. Make sure you're hydrated. Drink more water. One guy died from fluoride poisoning. And then Hooper Bay was sued by his widow. So it's not a trivial thing. Another important item that you should realize is that these chemicals have to be transported here. I don't know if you remember the national news of hydrofluorosilicic acid being spilled on Highway 401 in the middle of winter. The driver was exposed and killed. So these are things that you have to think about.
Yes,
I
go
think
ahead.
that's a little bit spurious because we transport hazardous things under certain conditions all the time. And so that spill of HFSA could have been a spill of hydrochloric acid or some other reagent that was being used in a lab. I'm just saying that that's not really a great example, with respect. But I think...
Didn't need to use it.
Hmm?
Didn't need to use it. No, never mind. I'll just answer questions.
Okay. I see no further questions. Thank you very much, and to both of you. And I also should mention to the public that we have the email that's available, right? Could you read the Fluoride?
Fluoride at sarnia.ca.
And that's going to be open till when?
That will be open till this coming Friday.
So your input is welcome that way as well. We also have some other registered speakers, and first one is Mr. Rod Gowrie. Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Gowrie, for your return here. And I was told by the city clerk that we're going to limit to 5 minutes.
Having a bad voice day here, so bear with me.
Thank you.
Firstly, I'd like to extend a heartfelt thanks to Dr. Lineback for taking time away from his hard-earned and well-deserved retirement. Driven by integrity and a sense of decency, he traveled 10 hours round trip.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, can you have him pull the microphone lower, please?
Okay, Mr. Gowrie, you know,
Better?
there's some...
Yes.
There we go.
Good.
He traveled 10 hours round trip to share as much of your decades of knowledge and experience as Council's 15-minute allotment would allow. Our city owes you a debt of gratitude, sir. Let me quickly recap some facts not in dispute regarding the EPA-certified hazardous waste that is being intentionally injected into our drinking water at Laws. There has never been one single test of this substance for human health harm, absolutely unheard of for any substance being used as a medication for any health issue ever. It is U.S. EPA-certified hazardous waste. If it was not injected in our drinking water, the only other option for this substance would be disposal at a site like Clean Harbors. The safety data sheet specifies, and I quote, should not be released into the environment if product contaminates rivers, lakes, or drains, inform respective authorities, unquote. Yet when released into our drinking water, there's no requirement to contact anyone. Further, the safety data sheet discloses that chronic exposure may entail dental or skeletal fluorosis, unquote. Chronic exposure is defined by repeated continuous exposure to a hazardous substance over an extended period of time, 7 to 70 years. This means every single person served by Laws are and have been chronically exposed and subject to dental and skeletal fluorosis. It should be noted that mild skeletal fluorosis presents medically exactly the same as arthritis. Hydrofluorosilicic acid contains at least 4 chemicals on the EPA's list of chemicals with substantial evidence of developmental neurotoxicity, brain poisons in layman's terms. The drinking water supplied at Laws currently contains 14 chemicals on this list. There are no studies or research that determine the effect of chronic exposure to 14 known neurotoxins or brain poisons. It should, however, come as no surprise to anyone that studies show children living in areas injecting this hazardous waste have higher levels of lead in their blood and higher incidence of ADD, ADHD. Hydrofluorosilicic acid addition dramatically increases the rates of dental fluorosis. The organizations that continue to promote fluoridation dismiss this condition as purely cosmetic. It actually is a defect of the tooth enamel due to fluoride toxicity, and my question is, what local, provincial, or federal health authority has given you the authority or consent to knowingly and without warning cause damage to children's teeth, cosmetic or otherwise? While U.S. institutions that promote the artificial water fluoridation have acknowledged the absence of consent and have begun quietly warning mothers of newborns against mixing formula with fluoridated tap water, our local health authority provides no such warnings. Instead, our local health authority is currently promoting false and misleading propaganda, including the idea that hydrofluorosilicic acid is actually of higher quality and purity than pharmaceutical fluorides. This serves only to mislead and misinform the very citizens they're charged with protecting. In closing, I want to make crystal clear to the council members of the 6 municipalities served by Laws exactly what it is you're doing. You are authorizing the use of EPA-certified hazardous waste that has never been tested for human health harm and has never been approved by Health Canada or the FDA as a medication for your entire communities. You are authorizing the addition of known neurotoxins and carcinogens to our drinking water. You're prescribing as a medication a substance that could not be legally prescribed by any medical professional for any reason to one single person. It would be an illegal act and would cost them their medical license. You are authorizing the use of an unapproved, untested substance with no informed consent and in doing so in unregulated and unmonitored and uncontrolled doses. You are doing this in hopes that it might prevent 1/2 to 1 cavity per person per lifetime. As Sarnia's official position is that we want the intentional poisoning of our water to end, I request the following. Firstly, that we suspend all funds for artificial water fluoridation and insist that communities wishing to continue to accept 100% of the responsibility and liability with a letter of indemnity. No agreement with the other municipalities takes precedence over the Safe Drinking Water Act. If you're a council member who has decided in the past to simply defer your opinion to that of the local health authority rather than doing your own research, consider the following. Today you were able to listen to two starkly opposite opinions regarding the possible benefits and risks of this practice. With no disrespect to Dr. Ranaday, who simply supported the position of his employer today, you were given the opportunity to listen to Dr. Lineback today, who possesses decades of knowledge and experience in the area of preventative dentistry and fluoride's effects. Dr. Lineback is without question one of the very brightest minds in our country on this subject. Should you decide to defer your opinion to that of a medical professional, the choice of which should be painfully obvious.
Thank you, Rod. You just made it. Here is Mr. Ed Williamson. And that's followed by John Spovieri. Perhaps Mr. Spovieri could make his room closer to...
Yeah, he's here.
Okay.
My fellow citizens, I relish the opportunity to be amongst you today. Is the Integrity Commissioner here? This is City Hall. You have to be careful. All right, I'd like to just say something to the anti-fluoride lobby. Actually, I got a question for you. That data I got today, the bodies should be piling up out there. Whew. You know, I respectfully suggest to the anti-fluoride lobby, take a long, hard look at what's going on around you and forget picking on poor old Mr. Fluoride. All he wants to do is fight cavities. Let's talk about the real killer. The anti-fluoride lobby needs to do a 180 and attack the real killer amongst us. It's all around us. It's on store shelves. You can't get it into schools. My brothers, I'm talking about peanut butter. There's the real killer. Forget about poor old Mr. Fluoride. All he wants to do is fight tooth decay. I'll tell you how deadly peanut butter is. Get out your phone, Google CTV, peanut butter, death. You'll get a story about a year ago. I think it's around Montreal. Young guy goes to his girlfriend's house, knocks on the door, gives her a kiss. Minutes later, she's stone cold dead on the floor. He had a peanut butter sandwich before he got there. Is fluoride anywhere close to being that deadly? I think not. Forget picking on poor old Mr. Fluoride. All he wants to do is fight tooth decay. That's all. So I say to the anti-fluoride lobby, seize the baton. Address the moment. Turn your attentions and eradicate peanut butter from the face of the earth. That's what you need to do. Don't pick on poor old Mr. Fluoride. All he wants to do is fight cavities. Now, City Council, I'm talking about City Council that was around the last time we had the fluoride vote. I got to be careful how I describe them. I mean, I don't want the commissioner on my case here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call them confused people. During that last vote, the confused people on council ignored the Public Health Agency of Canada, they ignored the Canadian Medical Association, they ignored the Canadian Dental Association, they ignored the World Health Organization, and the United States Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Those dummies, what do they know? They voted to take fluoride out of our water. Thank God the surrounding community thought otherwise, or we wouldn't have any fluoride in our water today. My friends, logic and science is alive and well in the county. And I further say to council, Citizen Williamson, that's me, eagerly awaits the next election. And I further say to council, reach into the box. Reach into the box and take out a tissue. Wipe your eyes and blow your nose, because Bradley is going to get reelected. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. We have John Spovier as the next speaker.
Thank you, dear, but I have
He's a pretty good speaker, I tell you that much.
And I understand you're original councillor in Brampton.
Yes, I am, Mr. Chairman.
Very nice to see you here.
It was a very nice drive coming. The weather was nice, and thank you very much, everyone, for having me to attend. I had prepared a half-hour slide
No, so
presentation.
you have to synthesize that.
So I understand I have 5
and
minutes.
you can leave with all the material.
But I
with
will
us.
leave this for anyone who is really interested in my material that I've been able to accumulate for the last 6 years.
To really appreciate that.
This is just a small, condensed amount, and I also had a smaller package given to the assistant clerk to provide to members of council that I put together this morning, knowing that I only had 5 minutes to talk. So it's also there available for you. Before I get going and read my prepared notes, I'd just like to, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to the medical doctor. I highly respect the medical people. Actually, my grandson is starting to be a doctor, so I have a high regard for doctors, and so I don't mean to be disrespectful. But I'd like to point out in 2011, the Association of Local Public Health, Alpha, they held a meeting, and one of the things that they came up with is that they advised all medical doctors, public health doctors, that there is no room for personal views on fluoridation. So medical doctors don't have a personal view. They have to follow what the province and the Minister of Health basically sets the policies, and they have to follow them. So with that, I'll just read my prepared notes. I actually put up this morning in a very fast manner, so excuse any poor spelling or sentences. I didn't have time really to refine it. So my name is Regional Councillor John Sprovieri from the Region Appeal, and I thank everyone for giving me this opportunity to address you today regarding artificial fluoridation. I have been researching the issue of water fluoridation for the past 6 years at the Region Appeal. I've been a regional councillor for the last 14 years and a city councillor for the last 29 years. So we have a double role, city and regional at Peel Region. And after having done all my research, which I have piles and piles of scientific studies, and I have come to the conclusion that municipal councillors who decide whether we fluoridate or not the population, like you and I, have been duped by Health Canada, the province, and our medical officers of health in approving the adding of a dangerous toxic waste product into our constituents' drinking water supply. As you may know, the village of Forest Hill, just outside Toronto, back in the mid-1950s, challenged Toronto when they started fluoridating their water because they didn't want fluoridated water. And Forest Hill is where the affluent people of Toronto live, all the business people, the professionals, doctors, lawyers, engineers. That's still today, it's a prime area for those people. And so this, they challenged in court, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada. So in 1957, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled that water fluoridation was a medication and that municipal councillors did not have the authority to medicate the population. So Health Canada basically is responsible for, should be responsible for approving fluoridation because it's regarded to be legally, according to the Supreme Court, a medication. But instead of taking responsibility and the liability for adding a toxic waste to our water supply, Health Canada allowed the province to classify water fluoridation as a water treatment chemical, which is, falls under the responsibility of the province. So technically, today, if you look up water fluoridation is regarded to be a water treatment chemical. That is pure nonsense. Fluoridation is supposed to treat the person's teeth. Water treatment chemicals like chlorine treats the water. So totally out of line. Makes me angry when I think about that. To add to the scam, I call it a scam right from day one, and I got proof in my package there. Health Canada recommends that toxicology reviews be done on the fluoridation agent, hydrofluorosilicic acid, to ensure it's safe for human consumption. That is a Health Canada requirement, that toxicology reviews should be done. The record shows that no one has ever done any toxicology studies on HSFA or on fluoride. The province has not done the toxicology studies required by Health Canada because they have given the responsibility for approving water fluoridation to municipal councillors like you and I. Peel Region has not done the required toxicology studies, nor has any other municipality, to my knowledge, that still adds the toxic waste to their water supply. I don't believe anyone has ever done toxicology studies on. Health Canada has turned their heads the other way and not enforced their requirement for the toxicology reviews that Health Canada province reviews. Health Canada in the province have been pulling the wool over municipal councillors' eyes for a long time. The good news is that when councillors do their research and find out how little benefit fluoridation has, they can make a change for the better. To the point now that 70% of Canadians, towns and cities, Canadians in towns and cities have discontinued fluoridation. 70%. British Columbia is 98% fluoride free, and Quebec is 98%, and so on. And every year there's more and more towns and cities that are removing fluoride. While Health Canada and the province are telling councillors across Canada that water fluoridation is safe, effective, and essential for good health, they have stood by and watched the defection continue, taking no action. In 2015, Peel Regional Council set up a community water fluoridation committee to review water fluoridation and has concluded that municipalities don't have the resources or expertise to carry out the required toxicology studies recommended by Health Canada. On February 22, 2017, Peel Regional Council sent a resolution to the Provincial Minister of Health and the Premier to take over the responsibility of water fluoridation and to do the toxicology studies that Health Canada requires.
John, I
Done?
think you went through the 5 minutes, but we truly appreciate your presentation, and we hope to.
Well,
study.
I just have one more sentence.
Oh, one more sentence. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm saying I'm asking here at Sarnia to do what Peel Regional Council and tell the province that fluoridation is not a municipal council's responsibility, and let them take the responsibility and the liability for its approval.
Thank you, Mr. Sprovieri. I would love to hear more from you, but I am bound by the
I understand,
rules.
and that's why I will leave my presentation with you so that
Yeah.
it
would be
can
great.
also be shared with everybody.
Oh,
Actually,
I actually see one councillor raising the hand here. Councillor White.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming down, Councillor Spovieri. Appreciate your time and commitment to the issue. You had indicated that Health Canada has been pulling the wool over all of our collective eyes. Just wondering if you've done some research, far more than I have, admittedly. If you could give me some sort of indication as to why they would do that. Are they looking for an alternate place to dump toxic waste, and they're doing it slowly and surely through our water supply system? What's the motivation for trying to do this? Not to be helpful.
This is only my speculation. It hasn't been. No one has ever really. Actually, the Minister of Health, Dr. King, when she was the Chief Medical Officer of Ontario, was asked why the province does not take responsibility and mandate and legislate fluoridation, and her response was, "It's a complicated matter." That was her response. To Alpha. It's a complicated matter, and it's in my bigger presentation. My feeling is that fluoridation has been promoted by Health Canada and the province, the health community for the last 72 years, and I believe that they just can't turn around and say we've made a mistake, councillors, public, for the 72 years, and we feel now that it's time to take it out. I feel that they're just, I believe there's a cover-up. I think that they're trying to cover it up because they don't want to be embarrassed. Especially Health Canada is under siege, especially with vaccines today. You know, there's a lot of controversy about vaccines. So Health Canada cannot afford the embarrassment of, so they're just covering up just a big lie, hoping that, never admitting it, and slowly people catch on. When councillors do their homework, they catch on and they say, take it out. And that's what's been happening right across Canada for the last, ever since Vancouver was the first city to discontinue fluoridation in 1972. And there's Dr. Cooney, he's also in my presentation, has admitted that there's no difference in calories between Toronto and Vancouver. Toronto is fluoridated, Vancouver is not.
Thank you, Mr. Sprovieri. Truly appreciate your visit. I hope you enjoy the city. You know, is that your first visit here?
Yes, it is. It is my first visit. Thank you very much.
Beautiful
It's
city.
very nice. I enjoyed it's a very nice town. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Ms. Ciancino.
Good afternoon. Thank you, honorable members of council. I need to go. And I believe we have members of your water board, right? I don't know where you all are. Here?
We have some staff. I am on the
You're on the
last
water
board
board.
myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for allowing me to share a few words. I wanted to give a few minutes of my time to John, so I'm sorry that didn't work out. I'll just share really quickly because I know 5 minutes goes by fast. There were already things mentioned, so I'm not going to repeat them. And I think I'll just speak from the heart. I'll tell you a little bit about me. I'm a mom, 3 children, grown children, married 41 years. I happened to learn, and a new grandmother. I happened to learn about fluoride it was a fluke. I was diagnosed with cancer, and my son asked me if I wanted something, and I said, yes, bring me a tall glass of water. So that was the beginning of my journey. He brought me the water, and I got emotional. For no apparent reason, I looked at the water when he carried it to me, and I said, maybe there's something in the water. So many people are sick. Those were words that came out. I wasn't thinking about anything. My life has been about volunteering, and especially for those less fortunate, women's abuse and children and all of that. So my life is about caring for people. So sure enough, I find myself doing this because I care. John and I drove. We wanted to be here. You had an incredible expert, Hardy Limeback. He's part of, now I'm getting emotional. He was part of my core team. I didn't know that he lived right in my own community. When I read about him, he's cited all around the world. He's gone to Australia. He's gone all over. I thought, my God, he's a dentist in my community. This is awesome. So, Hardy, you have been instrumental in helping us in Canada. So, very quickly, without getting into all of it, we belong to the Region of Peel, which is Mississauga, where I'm from, Brampton, and Caledon, 3 communities making up 1,400,000 people. We went to Region of Peel in 2011. When I was researching, my son said, Mom, you know that there's fluoride in the water. And I said, well, yes, it's good for your teeth. And I smiled. I'm always smiling. And when I said it's good for your teeth, he said, Mom, there's more to it. And those were the words that got me because I said, well, what do you mean by there's more to it? He knows what I'm like. I just went back on the computer while I was researching cancer. That kind of went on the side. And I researched the fluoridation of our water. And I learned that it was a toxic chemical, all of that stuff, what you've all heard. And I thought, well, there's no way this could go in the water. It's got to be safe. There's no way. So it took me a long time to really understand it. I thought there's absolutely no way. So when you guys ask us, do you think they're trying to poison us? Of course we don't think they're trying to poison us. But what we did learn is that this chemical has never been tested for human consumption. And that was really the beginning. It was the open door to say, okay, Region of Peel, 2011, our medical officer of health brought forward a report. So I thought, we'll go to council, we'll just share our findings. Maybe they don't know, and this is going to be easy. They're going to take it out. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. And we understand why, because all the medical officers of health, 90 agencies, the EPA, the CDC, the ADA, the American Medical Association, it just goes on the list, 90 to 100 associations. So at the end of the day, that's what we're up against. But you know what? We are citizens, and we need to protect all our babies and our elderly. So what we did was we sought out a lawyer. I'm not sure if you know this. In 2014, a lawyer gave us a legal opinion. So you'll each, I can't give you a copy because it's very expensive. I had to give 45 to ours. But we'll give you a copy through the electronic. You can have that. There's an appended affidavit in here as well. Please review all the arguments. I'm not going to even talk about it. It's all here for you. You know, at the end of the day, as John Sprovieri mentioned, and Hardy Limeback, Dr. Limeback, pardon me, you are the decision makers, and unfortunately, they have asked you to decide. The American Medical Association, we have letter after letter after letter. giving us proof that there are no studies. The EPA said there are no toxicology studies. Health Canada, no toxicology studies. The American Medical Association, there was a letter that said, can you say there's no harm that will be done to any citizen? And they said, no, I'm sorry, we can't. We can't say there won't be any harm. So please challenge those telling you that it's safe. Ask for the studies. That's all we want. Prove that when we drink our water with this toxic chemical, which is deemed a poison. It took me a long time to say poison, by the way. I never wanted to call it poison. But it is poison. We brought Dr. Sushila from India. It cost residents $10,000 to bring her. She's a researcher, 35 years, testing your blood, your bones, and your urine. She can prove that fluoride is causing harm. So ingested fluoride causes many harms. We won't tell you how many. That's up to you. Please do your research. And the way we look at this at the end of the day, oh, and by the way, I'm not a member of the American Waterworks Association, but I'm getting their magazines. And this is actually perfect. It shows a man in a suit. It should be a woman, actually. And it's got the road, and it splits off. And I thought, this is what we're up against. And the little signs, one has all these little letters, and I'm thinking CDC, EPA, all of those organizations. The other one goes the other way, and that's where we're saying, please protect the health of the citizens you were elected to serve. And our motto is, it's our health, it's our right, and it's our choice. And we're saying no to artificial water fluoridation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ciancino. The next speaker is Agneta Czechowicz.
Hello, my name is Agneta Czechowicz, and I'm a resident of Sarnia and a registered dental hygienist in Ontario and in Michigan. I would like to thank the City Sarnia councillors and their successful effort in voting to remove fluoride out of our water. Now we must ensure that the next steps are taken to bring other municipalities into agreement and vote in this direction. I've taken a keen interest in fluoride throughout my 25 years career in dental hygiene. In the late 1960s, my mother told me that the city of Sarnia had voted to begin putting fluoride in our tap water. She was shocked and disappointed, and I will never forget that. Several years ago, I traveled to Toronto to hear Dr. Limeback speak on the topic, and I was grateful to hear that he would be here today. Thank you for coming. As dental students, we are taught that drinking fluoridated water is good for our teeth. However, we are not taught of the negative health consequences. The poison that we taxpayers are paying for is a byproduct of industrial pollution scrubbers in the phosphate fertilizer industry. If not dumped in our public water supply, this hydrofluorosalicylic acid, HFSA, would have to be neutralized at a hazardous waste facility. People are led to believe that fluoride added to our water is pharmaceutical grade, like what the dentists and hygienists use and what we use in toothpaste, but it is not. It is illegal for dentists and hygienists to use HFSC, but it is okay to put it in the water? Logically, we might assume that no one would vote yes to adding this chemical, which has traces of lead, arsenic, mercury, etc., in our city drinking water. Dentists, hygienists, and assistants that I've spoken with are surprised to learn the facts about the harmful effects of HFSA. Adding it to our water violates medical ethics. Dosing without knowing patient history can only be done under medical supervision. 97% of the world, 70% of Canada, and 99% of Western continental Europe is not fluoridated, and they're still alive. and have rejected, banned, or stopped fluoridation due to environmental, health, legal, and ethical concerns. Dumping HFSA in the environment is already illegal per the Federal Hazardous Waste and Species at Risk Act. So, logically, how is it okay without any safety studies to dump truckloads of industrial waste into our water supply year after year at a cost to the taxpayer and to a detriment of our health? Many dental professionals state that fluorosis, the brown or white spots on the teeth, is just a minor cosmetic impairment, but make no mistake, this is the first sign of its toxicity. Aaron Brockovich put the U.S. government bodies on notice for the, quote, failure to warn the citizens of the health risks fluoride ingestion poses to the young, elderly, and those with health conditions. Here's a brief synopsis. Fluoride is an enzyme poison, an endocrine disruptor, causes worsening of allergies, inflammation, accumulates in bones and tissues, causing arthritis or making it more severe, impacts thyroid imbalance, interferes with glucose metabolism, which is a concern for diabetics, causes dental fluorosis, is neurotoxic to fetuses, infants and young children, is a burden to kidneys, resulting in increased fluoride retention and possible renal damage in those with kidney disease. Why should our families be forced to drink a toxin that is outside of the parameter of making our water safe to drink? What an inefficient way to dispense of this medication when the majority goes into our toilets, baths, and lawns. Mayor Bradley has suggested that the people should vote on whether fluoride should be kept in our water or out of our water. No one has the right to decide what type of medication we should ingest. The fluoride in the water is not fixing the decay that I see in children and adults and is wasting the taxpayers' money. Good oral hygiene, a healthy diet, without pop and sweets are the main ingredients to have cavity-free teeth. Let us join 97% of the world that is free of artificial water fluoridation and be healthier for it. Thank you.
The next speaker is Heather Martin.
All right, well, hello everyone. My name is Heather Martin, and I'm excited to be here today as a Sarnia resident to speak about something that I'm very passionate about, the big F word. Yes, that F word, of course, is fluoride, and why it should be taken out of our water supply. In preparation for today, I did a little bit of research and discovered that cities such as Vancouver, Calgary, Waterloo, and Montreal do not add fluoride to their water supply. So I asked myself, does Sarnia and Lambton County know something that these places do not know? These places that I just mentioned are some of the most progressive and forward-thinking cities in this country. So again, I ask, does Sarnia and Lambton County have some sort of mind-blowing study on fluoride that these other places don't have access to? Here in our community, do we have lower rates of cavity occurrences compared to these other major cities? Now, I do not have the data to answer these questions. Surprisingly enough, there is no hard evidence on this topic. So, despite the lack of research, I think we all intuitively know the answers to those questions. The reality is that any time a municipality discusses fluoride in their water supply, it always involves the discussion of fluoride being taken out of the water supply, and never a discussion about whether or not it should be added in. Now, I'm not going to dwell on all of the health controversies and environmental concerns surrounding adding a neurotoxic substance to our water supply. Health Canada has assured us that the levels are perfectly safe And as we all know, the government has never been wrong about anything. Please note my sarcasm here. Now, with that assumption, I would like to switch gears and look at something that I think we all can agree on: the ethical dilemma presented with the addition of artificial fluoride into our community's water supply. If I were to look around for someone out there in the audience who needs a little bit more energy today, maybe a pick-me-up on this Monday afternoon, and I brought with me this wonderful magic pill that gives everyone a quick jolt of energy when they need it, and I'll just sneak it into their water when they're not looking. Don't worry, it's perfectly safe, and Health Canada has approved it. So what's wrong with me doing that? Well, it would be very unethical and extremely rude to do so. Now, isn't this essentially what the Lambton area water supply is doing to the citizens of Sarnia and Lambton County with the implementation of fluoride in our water? As citizens, some might not care, others might not know, and people like me feel absolutely helpless over this substance going into our drinking water. Now, I've purchased a drinking water filtration system to remove the fluoride, but it is extremely expensive as the fluoride is hard on the filters and they need replacing quite often. And still, after all that effort, I'm still absorbing the fluoride into my bloodstream through my skin and hair when I shower. So I have tremendous sympathy with our wonderful city councillors because the law foolishly forces on them the responsibility for this fluoride decision. The truth is that, as wonderful as you are, you simply are not qualified to prescribe medications. And when you add an artificial substance like fluoride to a water supply, you are applying a drug without the people's consent. The effects on individuals are not being monitored, and the individuals have no option to stop it if they don't want it. All of these points are violation of medical ethics. Even if you have no interest in the science, or the science is too complicated, just on the evidence of a government pouring a chemical into our water supply and then arguing that it is safe for us is highly unethical. If people want fluoride or medical professionals want to recommend it, they already have a number of options available to them, including fluoride treatments at the dentist and purchasing fluoridated toothpaste. As opposed to people like me, where we have virtually no way to limit fluoride exposure. So, to restate my point, it really comes down to ethics. Should this neurotoxic chemical, whose benefits are becoming increasingly questioned by many different groups of people, be added to our water? I think the answer is clear. The answer is a big no. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Heather. Callie Miller. Callie Miller. Yeah.
Good afternoon. Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Callie Miller. I'm a retired registered nurse from London, a mother, a grandmother, friend, neighbor, and I am passionately against putting the second most toxic element in the periodic table in the drinking water of human beings anywhere under the guise of preventing tooth decay, when it is a mass medication of human beings and does not allow for choice for all. Excuse me, quite nervous. I have been attempting to end artificial water fluoridation along with my fellow members of Safe Water London for over 15 years. There are two simple reasons for ending artificial water fluoridation. One, there are no legally required toxicology or safety studies, as many others have seen. God, I don't know what's... You're okay. You're good. Showing that the toxic waste from the phosphate fertilizer industry, hydrofluorosilicic acid, is safe for human consumption, although there are many studies showing it is harmful. The dissociation argument for putting HFSA in drinking water has never shown to be scientifically true. That's the first reason. Second, The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms states that the individual is not to be medicated without informed consent, dose control, the more water you drink, the more poison you get, and regulation. Health Canada does not regulate HFSA. Who gives the council the right to mass medicate those who elected them? Does your neighbor have the right to tell you and force you to take HFSA in your drinking water? Many elected officials honor the chartered right given to us under the Canada Charter of Rights and Freedoms. There are times in life when you need to question official policy and do your due diligence. After all, dentists and doctors have told us for years that cigarettes are safe. Have you looked into this issue yourself? I have a list of 10 items that you might do further due diligence with. 1, there are no toxicology studies showing HFSA is safe. I'm not the only person that said that. 2, its individual charter rights are not honored. 3, every baby fed formula made with fluoridated water, bathed in fluoridated water, and fed food cooked with fluoridated water can have their IQ lowered up to 7 points, according to Harvard studies. This gets my heart with every new baby I meet. The 4th, the book, The Fluoride Deception by Christopher Bryson, which is the result of a 10-year investigation by award-winning journalist, showing that artificial water fluoridation is one of the greatest frauds ever perpetrated against humanity. A YouTube video shows a synopsis. The book by the same name is available on Amazon. The government, dentists, and doctors cannot now, after decades, admit they were duped years ago. Everything said by Dr. Hardy Lineback is true. A man who has risked his life, profession, job, and time to speak the truth. Unlike our medical officers of health who are paid many thousands of dollars to push a public health policy. Oh, good. 6, John Stewart, who's the CEO of the Windsor Water System, was correct when he said he could not locate toxicology studies and recommended that Windsor end fluoridation. This includes much searching, many phone calls, and research by myself and others. 7, what if cutting down on sugar, good nutrition, and oral hygiene while making sure our vitamin D levels are normal prevent cavities? As a Sarnia resident, you know that your councillor and mayor respect your individual right not to be medicated without informed consent, dose control, and regulation. The increased number of hip fractures in fluoridated communities was due to years of drinking artificially fluoridated tap water, which made the bones brittle. 10, the top 6 countries in the world with the most cases of cancer were all artificially fluoridated. After you have done your homework, you will know that artificial water fluoridation is harmful to all living organisms, including your pets. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Miller. This concludes the Fluoride public meeting. The email that you can submit further input will be open until Friday, June the 2nd. And the email is fluoride@sarnia.ca. I'll call for maybe 5 to 10 minutes break.